Suddenly, Leander, who sat just beside her, stumbled into the aisle as if shoved by an invisible hand. Seraphim reached out instinctively, but he regained his balance, frowning as if he too felt something strange. Before she could react, a dark figure appeared in the doorway. It was a fallen, one of the defectors who had escaped the garden and joined the mysterious secretive ranks of Emberly. Seraphim's heart pounded as the figure's movements jerked like a marionette with tangled strings, its jagged path leading it closer to her. The fallen's eyes burned with intensity, fixed on her alone as it spoke. Find the truth, it rasped, the words echoing through her mind rather than her ears. Seraphim felt frozen in place, unable to look away as the fallen reached out a hand, the air around it distorting with an unnatural warning energy. Heed my warning. Not everyone or everything is as it seems. It continued, the voice low and full of dread. Find the truth. With those words, the figure staggered back toward the entrance, its gaze still piercing, as if trying to imprint its message into her mind. A crimson wave, the color of blood, welled up from where the fallen had appeared. It crashed over the entire gathering, but there were no shouts or panic as everyone was consumed. A wave of consuming everyone and everything in its path. Seraphim was frozen in place. She tried desperately to make herself move as she was consumed. She closed her eyes as the acrid smell overwhelmed her nostrils. When she opened her eyes again, and the music started up again, and people were whispering to themselves. Everything was as if the fallen had never been there. Seraphim's pulse slowed as she continued to look around the room. It had been a visitation for just her eyes and ears. She moved towards a chair and quickly sat down and continued to look around. She was still in the atrium, the room as it had been, with Sylvana calmly reading names and guiding initiates. Leander was seated again beside her, watching Sylvana as though nothing had happened. No one else had seen the fallen, the wave of blood, or heard its warning. Her mother had mentioned that some people were gifted with the abilities to see and hear things outside Elysium. Maybe that could explain her feelings at this moment. Leander laughed uproariously, and Seraphim breathed deeply as she listened to the calming sound. But her realization of the enormity of what had just happened, she tried to calm herself, blending in with the other initiates. The fallen's message echoed in her head. Find the truth. What truth, and what did it mean by not everyone or everything is as it seems? As the ceremony continued, Seraphim struggled to focus, her mind still reeling. Her first vision had come with an urgent message, one no one else had heard, and she could feel its weight like a stone in her chest. She had to make sense of it. But for now, she would play her part. She had to learn as much as she could, not just about the trials, but about the secrets the garden hid, and who might know them. The ceremony continued, each initiate stepping forward to receive their mark of specialty on the inside of their right wrist. One by one, they approached a small crystalline pedestal that gleamed with a soft silver light, where Sylvana and several other elders waited to assign their symbols. Seraphim watched as each mark took form, a faint glow wrapping around each initiate's wrist before settling into a permanent symbol. Healers, Sylvana announced as she placed her hand over a young woman's wrist, a delicate mark in the in the shape of intertwined vines appeared, like green tendrils that seemed to pulse softly, infused with vibrant energies. Teachers, she continued, tracing her fingers along a boy's wrist. The symbol of a quill, feathered and intricate, glowed there, catching the light. Protectors, an initiate with broad build, received a bold circular symbol resembling a shield, outlined with tiny silver arrows at each corner. Leaders. Sylvana's hand paused over a young man's wrist, and a symbol shaped like a golden sunburst with 8 pointed rays materialized, radiating a quiet warmth. Seraphim shifted in her seat, curiosity tingling through her. The marks were beautiful, each unique to its bearer. As she watched, she noticed some even rarer symbols appearing for roles that hadn't been mentioned yet. A few initiates bore symbols resembling seeds, marking them as nurturers. Individuals dedicated to plants, animals, and the very essence of the garden itself. Then came an initiate with a bracelet of stars appearing in a shimmering, delicate arc around her wrist. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Occult, Sylvana whispered, a glint of pride and mystery in her eyes. The bracelet's tiny star-like marks sparkled faintly, and the young girl who received it seemed to be holding back a gasp. Finally, Seraphim's name was called. She stood, willing her legs not to tremble, and stepped up to Sylvana. As she extended her right wrist, Sylvana took it gently, her fingers unexpectedly cool against Seraphim's skin. "This one is different," Sylvana murmured, her voice barely audible. She glanced at the elders standing by, and they nodded. Sylvana closed her eyes, her grip firming as a faint light began to swirl around Seraphim's wrist. Seraphim felt a warm pulse, almost like the beat of a heart, as if the mark was alive. When the glow faded, she looked down to see her new mark. Not just the standard bracelet of stars like the occult initiates. Alongside the stars, small polished cat's-eyed stones were interspersed, creating a mesmerizing pattern that caught the light. The stones gleamed in shades of amber and green, almost as if a pair of feline eyes watched from each star. A murmur louder than before spread through the gathered initiates and elders alike. The elders exchanged glances, eyes wide with a mix of surprise and awe. Sylvana's gaze met Seraphim's, something unreadable flickering in her expression. "This is a rare gift, Seraphim," she said quietly. "This mark. It's a sign that the Mother Tree has chosen you to seek the unknown, to see what lies beyond the ordinary boundaries of the garden. It is the gift of the true occult." The true occult. Seraphim had heard whispers of it. A mark even the most promising initiates rarely received. It was said to be bestowed only once in many generations, given to those who possessed the sight, the ability to perceive hidden truths, and perhaps see what was hidden beneath the garden's serene surface. Sylvana released her hand, and Seraphim returned to her seat, her heart racing with both wonder and trepidation. As she looked down at the cat's eye bracelet on her wrist, the Fallen's word drifted through her mind again. Find the truth. Something in her gut told her that this mark was more than a symbol of power or prestige. It was a key, and perhaps a warning. As the other initiates continued to be called forward, Seraphim found herself staring at the intricate bracelet on her wrist. The stars and cat's eye stones shimmered faintly, like tiny portals to something unknown. She could still feel a faint warmth from the mark, as if it pulsed in rhythm with her heartbeat. The fallen's words echoed in her mind again, sharpening the edge of her curiosity. When the last initiate received their mark, Sylvana stepped forward once more, her voice ringing through the atrium. "You each now carry a piece of the Mother Tree's purpose," she said. "You have been chosen because the sanctuary requires your strength, wisdom, and loyalty. The garden's balance depends on each of you finding the truth within your own nature and living that truth with unwavering devotion." Sylvana's gaze rested briefly on Seraphim before moving across the room. "We ask that you spend the next week reflecting on what your mark truly means," she continued. "Let its purpose sink into your being. You will be summoned at dawn each morning to the sacred clearing to deepen your bond with your role and receive additional training in your specific discipline." Seraphim's heart quickened. The sacred clearing was typically reserved only for fully initiated arborists. It was rumored to be where the elders performed rituals connecting them to the Mother Tree and the sanctuary beyond. To be granted access to such a place was a privilege reserved only for the most trusted. With a final nod, Sylvana stepped away from the podium, and the initiates rose, beginning to filter out of the room in hushed groups. Leander sidled up to Seraphim as they made their way down the corridors toward the atrium's exit. "An occult mark, huh?" he asked, glancing at her wrist with a mix of awe and caution. "And not just any occult. True occult. That's almost a myth." Seraphim gave him a small nod, eyes downcast. "It's strange," her thumb tracing one of the cat's eye stones. "It doesn't feel like an ordinary mark. It feels alive. I'm not sure what to make of it yet." Leander raised a brow. "Alive? That's something. And with everything that happened earlier, maybe it's a good thing you have that mark now. Extra insight might come in handy, you know." She thought back to the vision, the red wave that had felt so real as it washed over her. The fallen's jagged movements and cryptic warning loomed fresh in her mind, and she wondered if she would ever see him again, or if it had only been a hallucination. Yet, something in her gut told her it was more than a stray vision. The two walked in silence through the twisting corridors until they emerged back into the main hall of the Mother Tree, where filtered sunlight cascaded down in glowing streams through branches and leaves. As they passed into the open air, Leander turned to her, his face serious. "Seraphim, you should be careful. The true occult is rare for a reason. Some say those marked with it see things not meant to be seen." "Not meant to be seen?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. He nodded. "There are secrets, even here, secrets that lie buried in the roots of the garden." Leander's voice was barely audible, and his eyes darted around to ensure no one else could hear. "Maybe that's why you saw the fallen. You might see other things too. Things that could be dangerous if you're not prepared." A shiver traced down her spine, but Seraphim lifted her chin, meeting Leander's gaze. "If I'm meant to see something, then I'll face it. I'm not backing down." A small smile tugged at Leander's lips. "Good," he said quietly. "Just don't forget, Sarah. The garden isn't as simple as they teach us. Your gift, your mark, it might be as much a curse as it is a blessing." They parted ways, each heading toward their respective homes, but Seraphim's mind churned with questions, her heart beating to the rhythm of the pulsing stones on her wrist. What lay hidden beneath the garden's roots, and why had the mother tree marked her for this path? As she slipped back through the halls, the garden's tranquility settled over her again, but this time it felt like a veil, one she would need to lift if she wanted to find the truth. The evening breeze whispered through the garden as Seraphim entered the grand house, her feet barely making a sound on the polished marble floors. Her mind was still clouded with thoughts from the day's training, the stars and cat's eye stones still pulsing faintly as if they were alive, guiding her to some unknown truth. The house was quiet as she made her way down the corridor toward the dining room. She could hear the soft murmur of voices ahead. Her mother, Jolinia, and her sister, Harriet, they were already seated at the table, tea set out in front of them. As Seraphim entered, her mother looked up from her tea, a knowing smile playing at the corner of her lips. "Welcome home, dear," Jolinia said, her voice warm but carrying a note of something unreadable. "How was your training today?" Seraphim gave a small smile as she lowered herself into the chair across from her mother. "It was intense. I received my mark, Mother. True Oracle." She held up her wrist, the aislet of stars and cat's eye stones catching the light as it shimmered with an ethereal glow. Jolenia's expression softened, but there was a glimmer of something in her eyes, something almost like pride, but tinged with caution. Harriet, who had been quietly sipping her tea, tilted her head slightly, her gaze flickering to the mark before meeting Seraphim's eyes. "True Oracle," Harriet repeated, a slight frown crossing her features. "That's rare, isn't it?" "Yes," Seraphim replied, her fingers brushing against the cool stones. "They say it's given only to those who can see things others cannot. Hidden truths, things the garden keeps in the shadows. But I'm not sure what it means yet." Julian nodded, her expression unreadable. "It's a powerful mark, Seraphim. But remember, with power comes responsibility. You must be cautious with what you uncover. Some truths are better left in the shadows." Seraphim's thoughts turned back to the vision she'd had, the Fallen's warning echoing in her mind. Find the truth. She wondered if the mark was more than just a symbol of her new role. Was it a guide or a burden? She glanced up at her mother, but Jolenia seemed lost in thought, her gaze distant. The conversation lingered for a moment before Jolenia's voice brought her back. "How did the masquerade ball go?" she asked casually, her tone light but with an underlying curiosity. Seraphim hesitated before answering, her mind drifting back to the night she danced with the mysterious man. "It was unforgettable. I danced with She stopped herself. How could she explain the connection she felt without knowing his name? The mask he wore obscured his identity, and though she had known him for only a few minutes, there was something undeniable about the pull between them. A man, I take it?" Harriet teased, her eyes sparkling with mischief. Seraphim blushed, looking down at her teacup. "Yes, but I don't know who he is. He didn't reveal his name, and I don't know how to explain it, but there was something about him, something familiar." Jolenia remained silent for a moment, her fingers delicately tracing the edge of her cup. Seraphim couldn't help but notice the small shift in her mother's demeanor. There was a slight tightness around her eyes, a fleeting hesitation before she spoke. "You should be careful, Seraphim," Jolenia said softly. Not everything is as it seems at those events. People wear masks for a reason. Seraphim looked at her mother, sensing there was more she wasn't saying. What do you mean? Before Jelinia could respond, the servant entered with a letter on a silver tray, the seal embossed with intricate patterns. Seraphim's heart skipped a beat as she recognized the handwriting on the front, a flowing script that was both elegant and familiar. The letter was addressed to her. Excuse me, dear, Jelinia said, her voice as composed as ever. It seems you have a letter. Seraphim took the letter, her fingers trembling slightly as she broke the seal. She folded the parchment, her eyes scanning the words quickly. Dearest Seraphim, I hope this letter finds you well. I have not forgotten our dance. It was a night I will cherish, and I cannot stop thinking about the connection we shared in those brief moments. I look forward to seeing you again soon. Though I know our paths are already intertwined, I leave you with this. A promise of something yet to come. Your betrothed. Seraphim's breath caught in her throat as she read the final words, her eyes lingering on the phrase, your betrothed. Her mind raced. Her partner at the ball? Her betrothed? The letter confirmed it, but the uncertainty of who this person was gnawed at her. How could she not know his name? Who sent this? She asked quietly, glancing up at her mother. Jelinia gave nothing away, her expression calm but unreadable. I do not know, Seraphim, but it seems that your betrothed has already made his intentions known. Seraphim's pulse quickened. Betrothed. The word echoed in her mind. She stared down at the letter in her hands, unable to shake the feeling of something shifting beneath the surface. Mother, she began, her voice barely above a whisper. Who is he, the one I danced with? I need to know. Jelina's eyes darkened, but she remained composed as always. You will learn soon enough, Seraphim, but now is not the time. The Springwest Festival is fast approaching. Everything will be revealed in time. Seraphim's heart sank as she looked down at the letter again. There was so much she didn't know. Who was this man? Why was their engagement arranged without her knowledge? And what did it mean for her future? But for now she had no answers, only the cryptic words of her betrothed and promise of a revelation to come. The library was quiet, the only sound being the faint rustle of pages turning as Seraphim scanned the shelves. She had arrived early in the morning, eager to find out anything that might shed light on her new mark, the true occult. The more she thought about it, the more it unsettled her. No one had explained what it meant beyond the general idea of being marked for someone with the ability to see hidden truths. But there was so much more to the symbol. The stars, the cat's eyes stones, and it felt like it was pulsing with energy, as if it were waiting for her to understand its true purpose. Seraphim's fingers brushed over the spines of countless books as she moved from one section to another, looking for any mention of the occult or of oracles, or anything that could help her understand the significance of her mark. But the shelves were frustratingly sparse on the topic. What little she found was vague at best. Stories, myths, rumors, nothing concrete, nothing to explain why she had been chosen. She sighed, pushing a strand of hair behind her ear, her frustration growing. There had to be something here, something that could offer a clue. Just as she pulled another book from the shelf, the soft sound of footsteps approached from behind. Seraphim didn't turn immediately, assuming it was just another researcher passing by. But then she heard a familiar voice call out, and she couldn't help but tense for a moment. Looking for something specific? Leander's voice was soft, though the question was laced with curiosity. She could feel him standing just a few steps away, as though waiting for her to acknowledge his presence. Seraphim hesitated for a moment before turning and offering him a small smile. I was hoping to find more information about the cult, specifically the true occult. She glanced at the book in her hands, unsure whether it would be of any help. I haven't found much. It seems like an elusive subject. Leander's eyes softened as he took in her expression. The true occult, huh? He stepped closer, glancing at the book in her hands. Not a common topic in the library, but if you want, I might be able to point you in the right direction. Seraphim nodded, feeling the weight of uncertainty pressing down on her. I need to understand this, Mark, she said almost to herself. I need to know what it means for me, for my future. Leander paused, then gave her a smile that was reassuring but tinged with a hint of mischief. Well, if you're looking for answers, I'm not sure this place is the best spot for them. He leaned against a nearby bookshelf, his arms crossed in relaxed posture. Sometimes the best answers are found in unexpected places. Seraphim raised an eyebrow, intrigued but also slightly wary. And what exactly do you mean by that? Leander grinned, a playful gleam in his eyes. You could always come back to the training grounds with me. We could pick up where we left off. Sparring, I mean. It's a good way to clear your mind, and I'm sure you could use the distraction. His gaze softened slightly as he looked at her. Training might give you more than just physical strength. It might help you see things more clearly. Sometimes pushing yourself in one area helps to find clarity in others. Seraphim hesitated for a moment, her mind swirling with the weight of everything that had happened recently. The mark, the vision, the letter from her betrothed, it all felt like too much to process at once. But there was something in Leander's suggestion that resonated with her. The sparring session could give her a chance to focus on something physical, a way to release some of the pent-up tension she was feeling. I'm not sure I'm in the right frame of mind for sparring, Seraphim admitted, running a hand through her hair. I've been trying to make sense of everything, but I feel lost. Leander's expression softened, and he stepped a little closer. I understand, he said, his voice gentler now. It's a lot to take in, but sometimes the best way to find clarity is to stop thinking so much. When you're sparring, you can't think too much. You have to trust your instincts, your body. It might help you feel more in control of everything else. She considered his words for a moment, the tension in her shoulders easing slightly as she allowed herself to take a deep breath. Maybe he was right. Maybe a little distraction would help her reset her mind. All right, she said, finally giving him a nod. Let's spar. I could use a break from all the thinking. Leander's grin widened and he stepped back, offering her a playful salute. Good choice. Meet me at the training ground in 15 minutes. He glanced toward the door, already turning to leave. I'll grab the equipment. Seraphim watched him for a moment before nodding. I'll be there, she called after him, feeling a strange sense of calm wash over her at the prospect of training. As Leander disappeared down the hallway, Seraphim lingered for a moment, her eyes drifting back to the bookshelves. For a brief instant she thought about searching for more answers. But something told her that, for now, the answers she needed weren't going to be found in a book. With a final glance to the shelves, she placed the book back on in its rightful place and made her way out of the library. The crisp air of the training grounds greeted her as she stepped outside, and she felt a surge of anticipation stir in her chest. This was something she could control, something she could focus on. Leander was already waiting for her. his expression ready for the sparring session ahead. As she approached, he offered her a grin, his stance already assuming a casual but alert readiness. Seraphim took a deep breath, shaking off the weight on her shoulders. Tonight she would spar, and for once she would focus on the here and now. The answers would come in time. For now, she would simply be present.